Untrodden Peaks and Unfrequented Valleys. Section 7. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Untrodden Peaks and Unfrequented Valleys, A Midsummer Ramble Through the Dolomites. By Amelia B. Edwards. Chapter 4. At Cortina, Part 1. Situated on the left bank of the Boita, which here runs nearly due north and south, with the Tres Croce Pass opening away behind the town to the east, and the Tres Sassi Pass widening before it to the west, Cortina lies in a comparatively open space between four great mountains, and is therefore less liable to danger from bergfalls than any other village, not only in the Val d'Ampezzo, but in the whole adjacent district. For the same reason it is cooler in summer than either Caprile, Agordo, Primario, or Predazzo, all of which, though more central as stopping places and in many respects more convenient, are yet somewhat too closely hemmed in by surrounding heights. The climate of Cortina is temperate throughout all the year. Ball gives the village an elevation of 4,048 feet above the level of the sea, and one of the parish priests, an intelligent old man who has devoted many years of his life to collecting the flora of the Ampezzo, assured me that he had never known the thermometer to drop so low as 15 degrees of frost even in the coldest winters. The soil, for all this, has a bleak and barren look. The maize, here called grano turco, grows thin and hungerly, and the vine is unknown. But then agriculture is not a specialty of the Ampezzo Thal, and the wealth of Cortina is derived essentially from its pasture lands and forests. These last, in consequence of the increase and the increasing value of timber, have been lavishly cut down of late years by the commune, too probably at the expense of the future interests of Cortina. For the present, however, every inn, homestead, and public building bespeaks prosperity. The inhabitants are well fed and well dressed. Their fairs and festivals are the most considerable in all the south-eastern Tyrol. Their principal church is the largest this side of St. Ulrich, and their new Gothic campanile, 250 feet high, might suitably adorn the piazza of such a city as Bergamo or Belluno. The village contains about 700 souls, but the population of the commune numbers over 2,500. Of these, the greater part, old and young, rich and poor, men, women, and children, are engaged in the timber trade. Some cut the wood, some transport it. The wealthy convey it on trucks drawn by fine horses which, however, are cruelly overworked. The poor harness themselves 6 or 8 in a team, men, women, and boys together, and so, under the burning summer sun, drag loads that look as if they might be too much for an elephant. Going out as usual before breakfast the morning of the day following our arrival at Cortina, the first sight that met my eyes was a very old woman, perhaps 80 years of age, and a sick little boy of about 10, roped to a kind of rough sledge piled up with at least half a ton weight of rough planks. 8 o'clock Mass is performed at each church alternatively, every morning throughout the year. Today it happened to be down at the old church, and thither, attracted by their quaint costumes, I followed a party of chattering peasant girls, some of whom had their milk cans and market baskets in their hands. These they carried into the church, taking off their hats at the door, like men, and remaining uncovered throughout the service. The congregation consisted of some 3 or 4 score of very old women with scant white polls, a sprinkling of square-headed, robust-looking damsels with silver pins in their cubbed and plaited hair, and a few old men, so tanned and gnarled and bent that they looked as if carved out of rough brown wood. Then trooped noisily in some 400 children of both sexes, and filled the benches next to the altar, while the old bell-ringer, having rung his last peal, came hobbling up the aisle in heavy wooden clogs and baggy breeches, and lit the candles on the altar. Presently appeared a priest in black and gold vestments, attended by little red-headed acolyte, like one of John Bellini's angels. The organist, by no means a bad player, led off with "Aci la mort" on a tremolo stop. The congregation dropped on their knees, and the service began. Musically speaking, it was one of those performances which one enjoys the more the less one hears of it. A showy operatic mass by some Italian composer, a reedy organ, and a choir that might have been better trained, made up an ensemble that soon sent the writer creeping towards the door. It was delightful to get out again into the glorious morning. The sun was now shining deliciously, the air was heavy with the scent of new-mown hay, and the birds were singing their own little hymn of praise in a way that turned the Cortina choir to unmitigated discord. It was one of those mornings steeped in dewy freshness, when distant sounds and sights are brought supernaturally near, when lights are strangely bright and shadows transparent, and the very mountains look more awake than usual. Even Tofana, rarely seen without a turban of storm cloud, rose sharp and clear today against the sky. Just opposite the old church lies the village cemetery. The gate stood ajar, and I went in, not certainly expecting to find the God's acre of this wealthy commune a mere weed-grown wilderness. But so it was. Here a confusion of rough stone heaps marking the graves of the poor, yonder a few marble tablets and iron crosses against the wall, recording the names of the better class dead, everywhere coarse deep grass, thistles, nettles, loose stones, broken pottery, and trampled clay. A couple of hand biers, a pile of black trestles, a spade and a coil of rope lay ready for use under a stone arcade at the farther end of the enclosure. Not a flower was there, not a touch of poetry or pathos in the place, nothing but indifference, irreverence, and neglect. This ugly sight, somehow, brought back the recollection of an alms-box that I had seen, not long ago, outside a pretty little cemetery near Luino, bearing the following inscription: Messa funerale, nel nome della Beata Maria, carita por noi. Funeral Masses, we implore charity in the name of the Blessed Mary. This appeal, coming like a voice from the dead, had struck me at the time as very awful, but here it would have been still more awful and more appropriate. Going homewards, I found sheds and booths of all sizes springing up the whole length of the village street, and a great wooden enclosure like a circus being erected in the piazza opposite the albergo of the Stella d'Oro. A huge coloured poster representing feats of the trapeze, clowns, human pyramids, and the like, pasted on a space of blank wall close by, sufficiently accounted for the shape and size of this building. "But what is the Sagro?" I asked of a young priest who was gravely watching the carpenters at their work. "Is it a fair?" "It is a festival of the church, Signora," he replied with an air of reproof, and walked away. A Sagro, however, as I soon came to know, is both a fair and a religious festival, and takes place once a year in every village on the anniversary of the consecration of the church, or on the festa of the saint to whom the church is dedicated. And there are so many villages scattered about the country that a Sagro is said to be going on somewhere every day in the year. Hurrying back now to breakfast, I found the Ghedinas, our courier, and a group of guides and peasants assembled outside the door of the Aquila Nera, staring up at the rugged peak known as the Baie di Mazzadi on the opposite of the valley. Telescopes were being passed from hand to hand amid exclamations of "Eccoli! Brave Signora! Brave Inglesi!" And old Ghedina, steadying his own glass for me against an angle of wall, bade me look up yonder for my countrymen. 2 English gentlemen then staying with their wives in the dependence of the Aquila Nera had, it seemed, this morning achieved the first ascent of that singular peak so aptly described by Mr. Gilbert as a carious tooth of Dolomite. The beck itself looked neither very high nor very difficult, but I afterwards learned that it was peculiarly steep and fissured, and that they had had hard work to conquer it. Ghedina's glass proved to be a good one, and I distinctly saw the figures of the climbers and their guides standing together on the topmost peak, relieved against the sky. It being our intention to spend some little time at Cortina, thence making such excursions as lay within easy reach, we decided to devote this first day to getting ourselves acquainted with the general lay of the country. The most effectual way of achieving this end is, of course, to ascend some height, So, having consulted Ghedina's written list of excursions, we agreed to spend the morning in rambling about the village, and after luncheon to stroll up to the Crepa de Belvedere, a little summer house, or Jäger lodge, lately erected at a point of view on the face of a cliff overlooking Cortina and the valley, about an hour and a half's easy walk from the village, and about 20 minutes to the left of the cross on the road to the Tre Sassi Pass. The Belvedere, a tiny white speck against a scar of red cliff in the midst of a long sweep of fir forest, is seen from the windows of the inn, and lies before the climber all the way. Meanwhile, however, we breakfasted, wrote letters, examined the paintings and frescoes in and about the two houses, and made arrangements for shifting our quarters into the quieter and better furnished rooms over the way. Two of the younger Ghedinas, it seemed, were painters, a third carved cleverly in wood, and the fourth, a grave, practical man devoted to the business, the stabling, and the wood trade, played a trombone in the village band. Both houses are full of heads and studies in oil, designs for large pictures, and sketches of unequal merit. A head of a bearded man in one of the upper chambers of the Aquila Neri, and two half-lengths of his father and mother in the dining-room, may be taken as fair specimens of the skill of the portrait-painting son, while the external frescoes of the dependents, two in the new church, and all sorts of rough-and-ready designs, some military, some religious, some grotesque, flung here and there upon the walls of staircases, cart-sheds, neighbours' house-fronts, and so forth, represent the superior gifts and culture of the brother who lives in Vienna. As for the decorations of the dependents, they are full of power, and to the sound drawing and skilful designing of the Munich school add a warmth and tenderness of colour almost Italian. Three large groups representing sculpture and architecture, painting and the physical sciences, and three medallions containing portraits of Raphael, Titian, and Albert Dürer, cover all that is not window space above the ground floor. The figure of Mercury in the first group, and of Urania in the last, and the way in which such stubborn objects as the steam engine, camera, and telegraphic apparatus seem to have been pictorially treated, are deserving of particular notice. To Albert Dürer, like a true German, the artist gives the middle place among the medallions. Very different, though almost as good in their way, are the mounted Cossacks, wild horses, and medieval men-at-arms that skirmish all over the whitewashed walls of the outhouses and stables of the Aquila Nera, to say nothing of the fantastic devil, all teeth and claws, that grins upon unsuspecting customers from outside the stove in the only chemist's shop in Cortina. We asked for the painter, but he was far away in Vienna, and his studio, they told us, was not only closed, but empty. End of section 7.